So we have more redactions in the documents and new information being released by the four main media channels. The information that's coming out is in relation to Daniel and Malaya's relationship, and it doesn't make Daniel look good at all. It's information that we've been discussing for the most part anyway, thanks to former girlfriends of Daniel and also thanks to text messages that were released from Malaya. I think they were between her and Sonny. So we have a lot of this information already, but this is now confirmed in the documents. Of course, Daniel's gone straight to his narcissistic playbook and looked up to see what his response should be and gone, right, yep, I have to play the victim here. So you'll see that there's a few discussions of this where some of the media stations have contacted him and he's given the expected result. Poor me, I'm being victimised here. I'm a good guy. Now, what I've done in this video is I've gone to all four articles and I've used the Globe and Mail article as the basis because that seems to have the most information. But then I've added in the other bits of information that's been included in the other articles that wasn't in the Globe and Mail. So what you should have in this video here is a complete coverage of all the information that's been released by the four main media channels. Now, before I get into all that, I just want to share an update on a case that I've been following for nearly 30 years now. And I thought there's probably a few people out there who followed the case too. And that's the Kristen Smart case. So Kristen Smart went missing in May of 1996. And it wasn't until only about 3 years ago that Paul Flores was finally convicted over her disappearance and over her not being alive. Kristen's remains have not yet been found, which is really sad for her parents, who obviously are ageing and have been just pleading for her remains to be found from day one. There were actually, even before Flores was arrested, there were attempts from his lawyer to negotiate a plea deal where I think he was going to just about get off scot-free if he told them where Kristen's remains were. So it seems pretty clear that he knows where her remains are. He's just not telling. Paul Flores is also known to have given things to women on dates and taken them home, having given them those things, and then them waking up in the morning not knowing what's happened. If you can follow my thread, because we are highly censored here, obviously. So because of that, he's received special treatment from inmates a number of times since his conviction. Now, last year, Flores launched an appeal against his conviction, and that's where today's news comes in.
We begin tonight with the latest in the case against local convicted murderer Paul Flores. Today, the California Supreme Court denied Flores' petition for review of his conviction for the 1996 murder of Cal Poly student Kristen Smart. The 19-year-old freshman disappeared in May of 1996, sparking a 25-year investigation. Flores was convicted of first-degree murder in 2022 and sentenced to 25 years to life. The Court of Appeal affirmed his conviction in October. San Luis Obispo County District Attorney Dan Dow says today's decision brings a stronger sense of finality for all involved.
They cut the audio off, not me. I have to say, it doesn't give a sense of finality until her remains have been found. And I think law enforcement needs to put pressure on Paul's family to try and make that happen, because his family know where Kristen is. This is something that I would like to do a video on in the future, and hopefully people will be interested in it and will watch it. Okay, so let's get back to Jack and Lily and the new information that we are finding out. And I'm going to start with the news report from CBC.
Newly released court documents in the case of missing children Lily and Jack Sullivan provide a closer look at the relationship between their mother and stepfather. The latest details come from lifted redactions CBC and other media outlets have been fighting for in the case. The documents include an affidavit filed by RCMP that explains the investigation to date. Malaya Brooks Murray and her boyfriend Daniel Martell were together for about 3 years before Jack and Lily disappeared on May 2nd. All of them lived in the Lansdowne trailer where the children were last seen. According to the documents, Martell told police they'd been fighting about money. His mother also referenced financial difficulties. The new records disclosed that in an RCMP interview, Brooks Murray said Martell would try to block her, hold her down, and once he pushed her. She said he would also take her phone from her when she tried to call her mom, which would sometimes be physical and hurt. Martell provides a different account. He told police their relationship was good and they had ups and downs like any other couple. He said they would yell at each other when they were fighting, but there was no physical violence in their relationship. RCMP Staff Sergeant Rob McCammon confirmed the nature of their relationship at the time of the children's disappearance is part of the investigation. Are any of the children's family members considered suspects in this case?
I wouldn't say anybody's a suspect. Again, we continue to gather information and whatever evidence that we are able to find, and we'll make our decisions based on that. But we are not in a position to really comment on suspects or anything like that at this time.
The case is still being investigated under the Missing Persons Act and has not moved to a criminal investigation. But in new submissions, the Crown noted that while there is currently no reasonable grounds to believe a crime has taken place, it could become criminal.
When they state that there are no reasonable grounds for a criminal offense, what that really says to me is that there's currently not enough evidence to make an arrest for a crime, but a crime is not obviously being ruled out. It's a very important linguistic distinction.
The documents also say RCMP are using technology-based investigative techniques which may provide information to support criminality and help find Lily and Jack. Angela McIver, CBC News, Halifax.
Those statements are included in the articles, so when I get to those parts, I will delve into them deeper at that point in time rather than do it here, because I want to keep the flow of what is being said here. But I think it's pretty clear they're becoming a little bit more relaxed in terms of giving public a little bit of information, letting them know that, yeah, actually we are looking at this as a criminal investigation, but we've got to be careful how we label it right now. Now, I agree to some extent with what this criminology professor is saying in terms of that they don't have enough evidence to make an arrest, but we know more about the case than that guy, clearly. What I would say is that based on what we know already about the case, they probably do have enough evidence for an arrest, but the goal is to make that arrest stick and to get a conviction in court. So they're working harder to make their case more rock solid. But of course this also allows Daniel and his turkey friend to live in their own little delusional world for a bit longer, believing that Daniel is completely cleared and is not considered to have done anything criminal. Okay, so let's move on to these articles. I've gone with the heading from the Globe and Mail article. Mother of missing Nova Scotia children complained of intimate partner violence to police, court documents show. The articles that I'm using are from the Globe and Mail, CBC, CTV and Global News. Now, I know that a lot of people can't access the Globe and Mail because it's a subscriber-only publication. Now, for that reason, I can't exactly make a PDF of that public for people to just download. But what I'm going to do is, because I have combined all 4 articles into one large document, after I finish working on this video, I will put them into a neat PDF and I'll upload them to my Patreon. So if you want a single document that's got all 4 articles combined, then I'll make that available. You just need to hop onto my Patreon. The link is in the description for my video. Hop across there. You don't have to pay to join my Patreon, it's free, and anything that's on there is free to download. There is a tiered option if you want to support my channel by having a monthly membership. But if you're just after documents and articles, then just go across, it's free, and you can download whatever you like. There's a large number of documents and stuff from the Madeline Soto case available also, plus some of the documents from the Kylie Rodney case. Okay, so moving on. Now, hopefully I've put this together in a way that it still flows fairly well. I apologise if there's any bits that kind of are a bit jarring in terms of jumping from one thing to the next, but I've done my best to keep it linear. So the mother of Jack and Lily Sullivan, the missing Nova Scotia children who disappeared more than 8 months ago, told police in the early stages of the investigation that her common law partner had at times been physically violent with her in the home, newly unsealed court documents show. When RCMP major crime investigators asked the children's mother, Malaya Brooks Murray, whether her then common law partner Daniel Martell was physically abusive, she alleged that he would try to block her, hold her down, and once he pushed her. Police wrote in an application to request records to help with their investigation into the missing children. She said he would also take her phone from her when she tried to call her mum, which would sometimes be physical and hurt. Now, we've seen in a comment by Malaya that she actually said a bit more about that. She said when she was trying to call Cindy because she wanted to leave, that's when he would take her phone off her to prevent her. I suspect that Malaya is playing things down a bit here because I think she realises that had she admitted to a higher level of violence in the home, there would be more questions about why she remained there with the children. This next paragraph is a bit of a backtrack, but there's an important point here, and the point is that she was specifically asked if he was physically abusive. And let's be real, how often when someone is asked that question with relation to their partner, do they either deny it or downplay it? So I don't think we're getting the full picture here, even in the slightest bit. The documents show that Ms. Brooks Murray told police about the alleged abuse during her 5th statement, almost a week after she broke up with Mr. Martell and moved away with their toddler. So that shows you, we saw in the earlier documents that were released, there was one part that hadn't been redacted where she claimed that she felt safe with Daniel and she was happy as. And I know a lot of people were jumping up on that and going, hey, that's evidence that, look, there was no abuse. She was happy with him. She felt safe with him. But I didn't buy it. And I think a lot of people didn't buy it because that is the classic line of someone who is in this kind of relationship. And the way it was worded pretty much screamed, this guy is abusive. So you'll note that this statement, it took her a week after leaving him to be able to make this statement to the RCMP. Now, I would imagine that in a later interview with them, she's probably given way more details. She's probably felt a little bit more free to really say what was going on in that relationship. But of course, the information we're getting from these documents only dates up to mid-July. So we're not going to hear information that's come out since then. But I can guarantee you that over time, Malaya has probably felt more confident about actually saying what was really going on in the home. To some extent, I believe. I strongly suspect that she would downplay anything in relation to the children, because otherwise that's going to make her look culpable, and her lawyers have probably advised her not to discuss anything in relation to how Daniel treated the children, I suspect. The allegations were recently unsealed after a legal application by the Globe and CBC to a Nova Scotia judge to release more information concerning the early stages of the investigation into the children's disappearance. And that's what we've got to keep in mind. These documents only go up to mid-July. There is so much more information that's come in, obviously, since then. And I'm willing to bet that a majority of that information is not going to come out until after an arrest is made. Mr. Martell, however, told police that the former couple yelled at each other when fighting, but there was no physical violence, the court documents show. He also told police they'd been recently fighting about money. Because, of course, when you're a narcissist, you are going to downplay everything. Yeah, nothing bad was happening. Yeah, of course we yelled a bit. All couples yell a bit. The funny part is Janie claiming that no, there was never any yelling between them. But, you know, what happens in that house is none of her business. Can I just point out that for two very young children, even a couple yelling at each other in a fight is going to be a traumatic experience. And that's before this mongrel started laying a hand on those children. Okay, so now we have some statements made by Daniel to various media outlets. Mr. Martell denied the account of physical abuse that Ms. Brooks-Murray gave to police. I did not ever abuse Ms. Brooks-Murray, he wrote in a text message to the Globe and Mail. And this is Daniel at his finest, because of course, when the accusation is physical abuse, his response is, I did not ever abuse Brooks-Murray. So he's not saying anything here in terms of that he never actually raised a hand to her or harmed her. In his mind, what he did wasn't abuse. But of course, he leaves out the physical part because that's just getting a little bit too close to the truth. And we know that Daniel likes to twist things carefully. And up until October, when he started just going all out with the lies, he used this strategy where he just carefully twisted the truth and got people to draw conclusions from what he was saying. And here is the classic narcissist strategy of flipping the narrative and acting the victim. So he described the allegation as a personal attack that unfairly cast suspicion over him, when he's been the only one raising awareness about Jack and Lily. All this twat has done in the last 8 or 9 months, whatever it is now, has been come out to defend himself. He rarely speaks about Lily and Jack. It's all about how, in his opinion, these things make him look innocent. Even down to the sit-down CBC interview. Is there anything you'd like the public to know that they may not already know? Yeah, they need to know that the children were seen on camera the day before the disappearance, because some people are alleging that they went missing before then. Like, that's not pleading for help to find Lily and Jack. That's him going, yeah, I just want to make sure that people don't blame me. And here's the biggest irony in this. If you've followed this case from the beginning, you will know that he came out hard at the start after Malaya left, trying to make it look like she was the guilty person. And Janie backed him up with that. And now when people are starting to see the truth, he's putting his tail between his legs and running and saying, I'm a victim in this, poor little me. If I remain in the public eye as a monster, the public's choice is guilty until proven innocent, he wrote, adding that neither he nor his family had anything to do with the children's disappearance. Of course, Daniel, we believe you. Although, given that Durwood is now saying that he's afraid that Daniel's going to frame him as being the person who collected the children at the end of the driveway, maybe Daniel's being truthful. And maybe he handed the children off to Durwood, and Durwood is responsible for their actual disappearance after Daniel did whatever he did. As in, Daniel handed over the children after they were not alive, and Durwood put them somewhere. But, given that Durwood has admitted to being a massive, massive liar, trying to find any truth in his statements is going to be an impossibility almost. And then we have the classic PC statement, the abuse allegation has not been tested in court and Mr. Martell has not been charged with any offence. Actually, we don't know if that's been tested in court because they're still going through family court. So it is quite possible that that allegation, as they're referring to it, has been brought up with the CPS court staff, and it may well have been proven in court, given that you have his own children talking about him being abusive towards Lily and Jack, and given that you have ex-girlfriends of his giving similar stories to what Malaya is saying. And here we get a glimpse of Daniel's next strategy, because this is what he said to two of the media outlets that contacted him. Reached Thursday by Canadian press, Martell denied the allegations of abuse, saying they are part of a narrative designed to make him look evil. So now he's going to flip the script and he's going to play the victim. Look at poor me. This has all been orchestrated by Malaya, who's hiding on the reserve and using Durwood to make me look like a bad person when really I'm not. It's a shame that he's forgotten that people can see through the body language and the lies, the inconsistencies, the changes to his narrative, and his own attempts to gaslight Malaya and make her look like the criminal in all this. Everything that he's done and said in the last 8 months or whatever it is now going to be flipped by him, and he's going to make out that this is all Malaya's doing. So I think this might have been Global Mail. I probably should have labelled each one as I went along, but it was a massive task just pulling all the information together from all the different articles anyway. When reached by phone Thursday, Martell denied the allegations, saying they're part of a narrative designed to make him look evil. I never abused Malaya, he said, but the narrative was set that Daniel was an evil person. You can see all the allegations online. It's absolutely insane. Note the "it's absolutely insane" added on the end, because this is classic. When a narcissist is accused of something, they put it back on you and say, you're delusional. You need to go get mental health. That's what he's doing here. But he can't direct it at a single person. So he's got to instead say, well, the allegations themselves are insane. I can hear his voice saying this, and I just want to slap the guy out. I'm sorry. I'm no longer trying to be diplomatic when it comes to Daniel Martell, because we've all seen the true Daniel now. We know what the situation is in this case. Asked about the allegation that he hurt his partner when he tried to take her phone, Martell said, allegations to make me seem evil. It didn't happen. So definitely putting it back on Malaya. Yeah, she's saying this because she wants to make me look bad. Honestly, the guy's like a broken record, isn't he? I'm completely honest and open with absolutely everything, he said Thursday. Yet we can actually prove that that is not the truth, Daniel. I've been the figurehead for Lily and Jack investigation. I've been at the forefront displaying everything I could and telling everything I could to the public to keep them up to date on everything that's going on. You are such a narcissist that you have this overwhelming need to control everything, and you feel the need to control the narrative, to direct attention away from yourself. That is why you've been out front and centre all this time. It's got nothing to do with Lily and Jack. For Daniel, everything he does is about control. He needs to know where things are at with the investigation. He needs to control the public perception of him, of Malaya, of everybody else connected to the case. Every bit of information that he's come out with to the public has been self-serving, or an attempt to steer the narrative and direct attention away from himself before someone else comes out with it. What a joke though. I've been the figurehead for the Lily and Jack investigation. No, you're the face that we put on a dartboard and try and get a bullseye. In terms of the investigation, I think we would describe Rob McCammon as the figurehead of the investigation. As for the case, as for Lily and Jack, the person who is representing them the most, that would have to be Belinda. And not far behind her is Chelsea. Because they are in it for Lily and Jack. And they've made it clear that's why they're there. Even Hayley, she's barely come out in the last 8 months. But she has done more in terms of showing that she is here for Lily and Jack than Daniel has. Still, Martell said loose talk on social media has left his reputation in tatters. Oh my gosh. Yes, blame social media. Don't blame the fact that you came out hot from the beginning, trying to sell your narrative, trying to convince people that you were the good guy, constantly changing your story, constantly contradicting yourself, contradicting other people's stories. And let's talk about the many, many, many text messages, comments on various Facebook pages, in chat sections of people's videos. You did that, Daniel. You came out trying to control the narrative and trying to put it all on Malaya, and it's backfired in your face because people have seen through it. So, claiming that the talk on social media has left his reputation in tatters, he can thank himself for that. And here we have him completely trying to flip the script. That's what this has always been about, making Daniel seem evil, referring to himself in third person. That's just creepy. He said, speaking about himself in the third person, I didn't even read that part there. He has nothing to do with the disappearance, but in the public, as long as he looks evil, the public will judge him as being guilty. Was he on something when he did this phone call? Because it certainly sounds like it. Either that, or he's so used to using his sock accounts on Facebook, in chats and stuff like that, that he's forgotten that this is actually him being himself and not pretending to be someone else. And he's so used to speaking in third person now that it's just become second nature. I think what he's trying to do here by speaking about himself in third person is to try and give the impression that he's channeling what Malaya is thinking, what the public is thinking, and he's saying, this is what they're thinking. Because I know these things, I'm an expert. But it's also giving it that little bit of separation. He's not actually literally saying he's a victim here. There's no I statements here. Not when it comes to him being treated as evil. You know, making Daniel seem evil. Because he knows this is not the truth. So he's separating himself and trying to project it as this is what they're thinking, not what he is believing. So he's putting it away from himself. He doesn't believe what he's saying here, hence the third person. He's saying this is what they are thinking because he's trying to sell a narrative here. Okay, so this is a little bit left of centre, but like I said, because I've patched this together, it's a bit of a Frankenstein kind of article. In those court documents, there are details of an interview conducted by police with Brooks Murray. She discusses her relationship with Martell, saying she moved in with him on his mother's property in Lansdowne around August 2023. Yes, I do acknowledge that Amira is snoring really loudly today. These articles dropped for me at about midnight when I was going to bed. So I kept waking up all night. I should have just sat down and done this before I went to bed, but then I probably wouldn't have gotten to bed till 5 a.m. But I kept waking up through the night because of these articles. And I've kept the dogs up clearly because they are exhausted today. And you can tell that Amira is exhausted because she is snoring like a trooper. They had been together for about 3 years and it moved pretty quickly, according to the document related to the May 6 interview, adding that the two had met on Facebook. He moved into Malaya's grandmother's house with her after 2 weeks. He said their relationship is good. They have ups and downs like any couple. 2 weeks and they're shacking up together. That's really not surprising though when you look at their personalities. You have Daniel, who when he gets into a relationship like this, he would have love-bombed the heck out of her. So she probably thought she'd found her dream guy because of all the love bombing. He would have been on his best behaviour. Malaya, on the other hand, seems to define herself by being if she's in a relationship or not. So for her, the idea of moving in with this guy after 2 weeks was giving her a sense of identity. Suddenly she feels important again because she's got a guy hanging off her. Malaya strikes me as having such low self-esteem that her self-worth comes from being in a relationship. We know that after she left Cody, she was straight away out there looking for a new guy. Met some guy, didn't quite work out, met Daniel, bam, 2 weeks in there living together. That all goes pear-shaped. She loses 2 of her children, runs off, leaves Daniel, finds herself another fella. And I'm going to say sorry, not sorry before I say this, but it wouldn't surprise me in the least if she pops out another baby before the end of this year. The documents also say that on May 2nd and May 4th, Martell told police the couple had recently been fighting about money, but no other details were provided. Given that at that point in time, I think it had been 9 months since Cody had been able to pay any support money, I reckon that it was more than just recently, particularly given that he was only working 1 day at the mill and that Malaya seems to like spending money the moment she gets it. The couple separated soon after the search for the children started. Martell has maintained a very public presence since the missing persons case was opened. Of course he has, because he wants to control the narrative. And he wants people to think he's a good guy. The documents also suggest that Lily and Jack's biological father, Lily Sullivan, had not seen the children in a few years but was paying child support up until he lost his job 9 months before their disappearance. Now this is slightly poor journalism. They've said as part of the case, police sought 12 search warrants between May 16th, 2025 and July 16th, 2025. They're not search warrants. They are record access requests. There is a huge difference. Search warrants, basically, they're under a criminal investigation, which as yet they're still not calling it that. Record access requests, are what the name suggests. They're a request. They don't have to be proven as solidly as requests for search warrants. Here we have a rather extensive recap, but I'll go through it anyway because it does lead into the statements that were made by RCMP. Lily 6 and Jack 4 were reported missing by their mother and stepfather. I hate them saying that. On the morning of May 2nd, Ms Brooks Murray called 911 around 10 a.m. to report that they had wandered away while she and Mr Martell were sleeping, with their toddler at home in the remote hamlet of Lansdowne, Nova Scotia. A massive search led by RCMP turned up few clues that we know of. Police have been tight-lipped about the case. However, they recently explained that the large volume of information they've gathered is helping form pictures of what may have taken place. They declined to share their theories. Well, given that they've ruled out an abduction and that had the children wandered off into the woods, they wouldn't actually have a large volume of information, that only leaves one scenario. Unless, of course, you're an alcoholic ostrich, and then you will find a way to twist it to make it sound like, yeah, the children did wander off into the woods, they just didn't search far enough, otherwise they would have found them. Now, this one is a little bit more accurate. They refer to the 12 applications in court under the Missing Persons Act. But those applications were sealed by a court order. At the request of the media outlets, the RCMP consented to release some information in August, but redacted significant portions of the affidavits. The Globe and CBC went back to court to argue in favour of lifting more of the redactions, and the RCMP consented to releasing more, but not all, of the information in the records. Search warrants and the applications needed to obtain them are supposed to be made public after they've been executed, with some exceptions. But in this case, the RCMP have argued that certain information must remain private as the police investigation continues. What more evidence do you need that this is a criminal investigation? They have to hold back some of these things to protect the integrity of the investigation. One of the reasons cited by the RCMP for maintaining the redactions is the possibility that the investigation could turn criminal and that the release of such information could compromise an investigation. We've heard that line over and over and over. We know what it means. It means that, yes, they are investigating under the Missing Persons Act, and they are going to continue to do so for as long as they possibly can, because it makes their job so much easier. But at some point it will have to pivot to being named as a criminal investigation. When an investigation is ongoing, it is difficult to know what information, if made public, would compromise future investigative steps. While at this stage we do not have reasonable grounds to believe a crime has been committed, that assessment could change as we move forward with our investigation, wrote RCMP Corporal Charlene Curl in a January 8 affidavit. Just a reminder that Corporal Charlene Curl, she's the legal person that does all these documents, the records access requests. And in those records access requests, she does need to make it sound like it is still under the Missing Persons Act. So she needs to be very careful not to make it look like it is actually a criminal investigation, because otherwise the judge is going to throw the documents back at them and say, you need to pivot this, you need to actually put in a request for a search warrant, and you need to actually prove that you have reasonable grounds for this. I also want to remind you that as she is the legal document person, she isn't privy to every single part of the investigation. So her saying, and you can bet that this is like the other documents, where it's in italics and it's her putting her own personal belief. I believe this is like boilerplate in terms of these sorts of investigations when you're trying to keep it under the Missing Persons Act. These sort of statements are probably ones that she uses in multiple documents to try and fit in with the requirements for those documents. So saying, well, at this stage we do not have reasonable grounds to believe a crime has been committed, that is pretty much word for word what she put in those earlier documents. That assessment could change as we move forward with our investigation. In other words, we want to keep this under the Missing Persons Act because it's making it so much easier for us. It's giving us access to many, many more tools. And we will be pivoting this down the track to a criminal investigation when we feel that we have enough evidence to allow us to make an arrest. Now, I think this is one of the really important paragraphs here. Corporal Curl said in the document, the RCMP continues to explore all avenues and are leveraging technologically based investigative police techniques which may provide information to support criminality and uncover the whereabouts of the missing children, which may provide information to support criminality. She's telling us right there what the direction of the case is. It is a criminal case, and they are basically pulling out all the stops to make sure... I swear that dog is trying to snore louder than I'm talking. Sorry. It seems like they are trying to pull out all the stops to make sure that they have a rock-solid case. I believe they know who is responsible for what happened to the children. They probably have a damn good idea of what happened to the children. And what they're saying here is that they want to get as much evidence as they can, because they want to make sure that whoever they lock away for a very long time. The newly released information shows that investigators were focused on learning about the home life of Jack and Lily in the early stages of their disappearance. The Globe previously reported on their family situation, including alleged coercive control that affected their mother, the parents' financial struggles, as well as admitted drug use by their stepfather, multiple black eyes on the children, and a visit from Provincial Child Protection social worker to investigate a report of abuse or neglect. Ms. Brooks-Murray did not respond to a request for comment. Previously, she has denied involvement in the children's disappearance. Other information in the documents that is still sealed relates to the wording of questions asked of Jack and Lily's parents and others during polygraph tests. Corporal Curl said she anticipates more people will be asked to do polygraph tests, and if the exact wording is released, it could seriously risk the integrity of the results of any future tests. Note she says she anticipates more people will be asked to do a polygraph tests. So it's not definitive. She's not saying, oh, we're going to be interviewing more people. She's saying she anticipates more people will be asked to do polygraph tests. It does sound fairly affirmative, but at the same time it gives them an out. So they can say, look, we might end up wanting to do more tests, so we're not going to release what the questions are. They're not saying that they're definitely doing it. So if they don't do more tests, they're not going to be in trouble with the court for lying. That said, I think this suggests that they probably will be doing more polygraph examinations. And that's really not surprising when you look at the web of deceit that exists in that whole community there. You've got the Martell family, the Mackenzie family, Durwood, Jordan, Chase. I don't know how much he knows, but I'm sure that he knows something. So yes, they may well be doing more polygraph examinations. I, for one, think Logan should be top of that list. Seems like her and Daniel discuss a lot of things. I think perhaps Earl and Ron. And heck, let's throw Durwood into the mix too, because honestly, what the heck is going on with that guy? RCMP and Ms Brooks-Murray also opposed releasing highly personal information that pertains to Ms Brooks-Murray and Mr Martell's relationship, parenting and financial situation. Now, I haven't seen any mention anywhere here of the parenting, so I wonder if that was left redacted or if they just haven't reported on that. But it doesn't surprise me that Malaya would fight it, because even though in some ways she's still a victim of coercive control and DV, but this girl is a narcissist at the same time. And she seems like she's not someone who takes responsibility for anything. And she's also, I believe, not someone who likes to be seen in a bad light. This is someone with a very fragile ego, in my opinion, so I can see why she would fight this. Corporal Curl wrote that despite intense media coverage and social media speculation, the highly personal information, to the best of her knowledge, hasn't been made public or confirmed by either Ms Brooks-Murray or Mr Martell. Well, she's clearly not paying attention, is she? Because we've got far more personal information on these people than we have for most cases. Now, this is a really interesting statement coming straight after her comments about personal information relating to Malaya. We want people who may be witnesses to feel comfortable coming forward and sharing information with us to assist investigations without fear that everything they say may become public, she wrote. That sounds like she's saying that Malaya is going to be called as a witness when they prosecute Daniel. And I have to say, if we get another Jennifer Soto situation, my head is going to explode. Now, for those of you who didn't follow the Madeline Soto case, what I'm referring to here is that Jennifer Soto was quite obviously culpable when it comes to the death of her daughter. She had been allowing this guy to share a bed with her daughter even before she turned 13. She was sending her daughter to sleep in a different room with her ex-partner because she didn't really feel like actually performing in bed herself, and she had a headache and she just wanted her bed to herself, and she never really encouraged her daughter to sleep on her own. So she could have a good night's sleep, she would send the pair of them upstairs to sleep together in the one bed. She also, throughout the early days of the investigation, came out to bat for Stearns. In her interviews, she definitely appears to be defending him, as opposed to helping investigators to find the remains of her daughter. I think many of us had that wishful thinking going on where we were saying, well, the reason they haven't arrested her yet is because they want to use her as a witness when Stearns goes to trial, and they don't want a hostile witness. We saw that they did that interview with her where she was given immunity for any information that she may have given during that interview which may have incriminated her. And there were lies that she said in that interview. We all believed that once Stearns was convicted that Jen would be arrested. It never happened. She got off scot-free. I really hope that's not going to be the case with Malaya, because even though to some extent she was a victim in terms of her relationship with Daniel, she also failed to protect those children, and she failed to report the crime. And it's also interesting that she's saying this here, that they, want people to come forward and share information without fear that everything they say is going to become public. Because look what they did with Brad Wong and Justin Smith. They named them up, they said what they had said, and then all of a sudden, Daniel has this orchestrated attack on the pair of them. As for Natasha Wood, I still believe that someone put her up to that. So I have no qualms about her name being put out there or her account being put out there. She was doing it for somebody who put her up to it. Ms. Brooks-Murray opposed releasing her personal information because it's highly personal, biographical core information that reveals intimate details about her as a person, wrote her lawyers Jennifer Cox and Samantha Allen in submissions dated January 9th. Yes, let's not damage Malaya's fragile ego when we're talking about a case of her two missing children who she failed to protect. Sorry, I know there's a bit of snark going on today. Like I said, I didn't sleep well last night because I knew that these articles were out there and my brain was just going, yeah, you got to work on these when you get up tomorrow. Ms. Brooks-Murray, whose father is Micmac, is a member of Sipganactic First Nation. Her lawyers asked the court to consider harm to her dignity through an Indigenous lens, noting that anti-Indigenous stereotypes are pervasive and harmful. That is loaded. First of all, let's just acknowledge the fact that Malaya allegedly doesn't have a great relationship with her father, but not only that, we heard directly from Henry and Connie that they were pretty much frozen out like everybody else when she got with Daniel. Malaya has not recognised her Micmac roots up until when she needed somewhere to hide. Now, I could go back through other articles and find it, but we know that in terms of Malaya's own paperwork, she only got that in order either just before all this happened or just after all this happened. I should also point out that whichever article that is in, it clearly states that the children did not have status. So this lie that Daniel was putting out about her getting status for the children just after they went missing is purely that, a lie. She never worried about trying to have her children learn about their heritage. We heard that from Connie in that Global Mail podcast. Now, I'm only going from an Australian perspective here, but when I hear someone saying releasing information about Ms. Brooks-Murray causes a greater affront to her dignity as it may breathe life into these stereotypes, if that was an Indigenous person in Australia, straight away I would say that we're hearing about a problem, an issue with drug use or alcoholism. And since the First Nation experience in Canada does seem to mirror the experiences of Australian Aborigines, that wouldn't surprise me if that is what is being referred to here. I mean, she's saying anti-Indigenous stereotypes are pervasive and harmful. So it is something negative about Malaya that Malaya doesn't want shared. Mr. Martell did not take a position in court about the release of the information. He was probably too busy being a mathematician to worry about getting legal representation and probably didn't even attend court. Okay, again, crappy journalism here. Use a bit of punctuation. RCMP Staff Sergeant Rob McCammon confirmed the nature of the relationship between Brooks-Murray and Martell at the time of the disappearance is part of the investigation. I'm not going to comment on anything being a factor, but I will say that any situation like that would be considered and followed up on by our people, said McCammon in an interview. This definitely points towards violence from Daniel being the reason that the children are not here. When asked if any of the children's family members are considered suspects in this case, McCammon said there are no suspects he can identify at this time. Because, of course, the moment you name someone up as a suspect, you have to pivot the case from being under the Missing Persons Act to a criminal investigation. And you are shooting yourself in the foot and making so much more work for yourself. Not only that, they're probably hoping that Daniel will come back out and start talking again and give them even more evidence to use against him. I wouldn't say anybody's a suspect. Again, we continue to gather information, whatever evidence that we are able to find, and we'll make our decisions based on that, said McCammon, the officer in charge of major crime and behavioural sciences. In other words, we feel that we need to build a stronger case still before we can make an arrest. So we're not going to name up any suspects until we have enough on them to feel confident that when we make an arrest, it's going to stick and that they will be convicted in court. Can we just acknowledge here, though, they are throwing us a bone. Previously, the only things we were being told was that it is still being investigated under the Missing Persons Act. They were steering clear of anything that could be interpreted as making the case a criminal investigation. They were being very, very careful with what they were giving us. Now we can see it is starting to pivot. They obviously feel that they do have enough evidence that this case is going to reach a point where they can actually press charges, because they feel confident enough to share with the public in a roundabout way that, yeah, actually it is criminal, there will be arrests. The fact that they are loosening up a bit here definitely says to me that they are feeling more confident about the direction that they are headed with this case, that they are feeling confident that they will be actually pressing charges. And then we get the usual statement: the disappearance is still being investigated under the Provincial Missing Persons Act and has not moved to a criminal investigation according to RCMP. I've explained that so many times. It is so much easier to investigate it that way. It's far less work, and in terms of record access requests, they can get far more things without the heavier burden of proof that is required when you're requesting a warrant in a criminal investigation. This kind of says the same thing, but I'm going to read it anyway. The mysterious nature of Jack and Lily's disappearance and lack of answers in the case has fueled widespread speculation online amid international media attention. In submissions filed recently with the court as part of the CBC's application to access records, the Crown noted that although there is currently no reasonable grounds to believe a crime has taken place, as the investigation persists, it could become criminal and persons of interest in the disappearance of the children might be identified. I think it's fair to say that the RCMP is actually acknowledging the elephant in the room here, but they are also saying, look, we're not ready to go further with this. I do want to remind you, though, that towards the end of December, Rob McCammon said, basically, we expect that there will be a resolution. So it seems that they feel confident that even though they're not at that point yet where they can make arrests, they feel confident that the direction they're headed is going to allow them to do that. The submissions also included an affidavit filed by the RCMP noting police are leveraging technology-based investigative techniques which may provide information to support criminality and uncover the whereabouts of the missing children. Now, I'm not going to speculate on what this technology-based investigative techniques are, other than to say that there would be multiple things at play here, and Daniel, Big Brother, is watching. McCammon said those technologies include the use of sophisticated drones and video review programs. Okay, it probably won't hurt for me to say that in terms of sophisticated drones, at least one of the things that those drones would be equipped with is LiDAR technology. So if you've not caught the video that I did some time back where I was discussing LiDAR maps of the area around Lansdowne Station, what LiDAR is, it's a laser kind of technology. So LiDAR actually means light detection and ranging, and what it is it's light, but it's in the form of a pulsed laser. And what happens is that it sends the light signal down to the ground, and it records the amount of time from when it sends the light signal off to when it bounces back to the receiver. And that allows a really accurate mapping of the surface. So basically it's looking beneath like trees, man-made structures and everything like that, and it's just showing you the ground surface. That will allow them to spot any mine shafts that are not recorded, any anomalies in the surface of the ground. So like they might fly a drone over an area that's heavily covered in grass or bracken or something, and the LiDAR will show if there is an indentation where there is perhaps a burial site. I believe that when it comes to LiDAR with drones, that it's only the topographic type, which is basically on land, not underwater. But we know they've gone over the bigger lakes in the area with sonar, and there are other sonar options which I'd imagine they are probably employing with smaller lakes where they can't get boats onto them. One of those is the Aqua Eye, which is what Please Bring Me Home was using during their search. So that is a handheld sonar device where they're basically doing it from the shore. I don't know entirely what the accuracy of that is, but I would imagine in those smaller little lakes and ponds and stuff that it would still show any anomalies under the water. As for the video review programs, I've actually discussed these before also. What these are is, this is actually a program that was created by someone connected with Texas EquiSearch, and they basically use that, or this is one of them, there's a few different, and I'll go into the other one as well, but in terms of footage from drones, footage from helicopters, there is a program that has been developed where they can program into that program the data that they are looking for, the image that they are looking for. So, for example, with all the drone footage, they might put in, we want you to find everything pink. Everything in the images that comes out pink, and show us those images. We want you to find anything that may be the shape of a body. Show us those images. So there's a lot of things that they can do with that sort of program in terms of reviewing all the drone footage, all the helicopter footage. So that's a brilliant tool. In terms of traffic cameras, the programming is very similar. Basically, it will scan through all the video footage in a matter of minutes. So hours and hours worth of video footage in a matter of minutes with thousands of vehicles. And if you've programmed it in that you want it to look for this particular vehicle, it will show you that particular vehicle, that model of vehicle. So that is useful in terms of tracking the movements of all the individuals connected to this case. Michael Arnfield, a former police detective and criminology professor at Western University of London, Ontario, said the Crown is choosing its words carefully in its submissions. Bingo. When they state there are no reasonable grounds for a criminal offence, what that says to me is that there is not enough evidence to make an arrest for a crime, but a crime is not obviously being ruled out, said Arntfield in a recent interview. It's a very important linguistic distinction. We know that a crime occurred, and we know that's the direction they're headed. We now have enough information from the many interviews to know that that's where this is headed. Yeah, this guy clearly hasn't followed the case all that closely. Arntfield said he's surprised the investigation has not turned criminal. In his experience, missing persons cases are generally deemed suspicious if they're not found after about a week. And I think we can say it was deemed suspicious on day one. Investigators are still sort of pussyfooting around whether or not foul play is involved and whether this should be a strictly criminal investigation, he said. I don't have all the facts, but I will just say it is novel in terms of these types of investigations, particularly dealing with two children. Now, this guy is a highly published guy who has done a lot of criminology research, so he knows what he's saying here, but he clearly doesn't know the case in significant detail, because I think otherwise he would recognise that they have a situation here where the person who allegedly is their number one suspect is just coming out and giving more and more and more. Why would they want to come out and name this as being suspicious and shut this guy up? He's given them 8 months worth of additional evidence for this case. But also, like I said, I think in this situation, it has worked extremely well for them to be able to keep it under the Missing Persons Act, because obviously there's been a lot of paperwork involved with this case. So I actually don't think that it's what he would term pussyfooting around. I think this was actually quite a good strategic move, because like I said, Daniel hasn't shut up. He is the gift that keeps giving. I mean, when you look at what all these clowns have been up to since the children went missing, without realising it, they have been helping the investigation so much. So why would you want to pivot and call it a criminal investigation if you're not ready to make arrests? McCammon said once investigators have gathered all the necessary information, we'll make decisions on any criminality that may be relevant to the case. So, in other words, what he's saying here is we're going to keep naming this as a missing persons case up until when we are ready to make arrests. That's when you're going to hear us turn around and call it a criminal investigation. And one little nugget on the end of this. Meanwhile, RCMP said investigators continue to assess hundreds of tips from the public and more than 8,000 video files, including footage recorded by motion-activated trail cameras and dash cam footage. You know, after reading this, I feel even more hopeful. Not just that there's going to be arrests, but also that Lily and Jack will be found. I said at the beginning of this month that I felt this year was going to be the year of justice. And you know what? I think that is what the case is going to be with Lily and Jack. For them to loosen up to the point where they're sort of telling us it's a criminal investigation, that tells me that even though they're not there yet in terms of enough evidence to make an arrest, they have enough evidence now to feel confident that with more evidence, with more interviews, etc., that they will be able to build a rock-solid case. They're not playing their hand just yet, but they're giving us a sneak peek. Don't forget too, they've been extremely conservative throughout this investigation. So if they're saying, yeah, maybe down the track it might become criminal, that to me says that they are confident that it will. I wouldn't be surprised if we see arrests within a 6-month period. And their use of specialised drones, that really fills me with hope, because that gives them the ability to search in areas that are being closed off to public. So Daniel and Janie, make sure you wave next time you see a drone go over the top of your property, because it's probably one of your friends from the RCMP. And I'm just going to say, if you know, you know. Kind of bugs me that they didn't mention several months ago that they had these specialised drones. Oh, what the heck, it's not going to go up in the area anyway. I might as well just spill the beans. So a few months ago I purchased a drone for somebody in the area to use for searching for Lily and Jack. I purchased a drone, a controller and spare batteries. So it was a rather hefty cost. That's why I'm saying I wish I'd known about these specialised drones a few months ago. Actually, I probably should correct myself there. Members did help me with the cost of some of that. But yes, it was a significant outlay for a drone that is superseded by something that the RCMP have got and are clearly going to use. And yes, I do feel a little bit red-faced right now. Okay, so that brings us to the end of all of these articles. Like I said, I will put these together for you into a single document and upload it onto Patreon. That way, for anyone who doesn't have access to the Globe and Mail article, while I'm not going to give you that directly, you can get all the information that is available in all these articles in one single PDF. It may not be up straight away because there's going to be a bit of editing to put it all into a neat, tidy document. You've seen that I've put it as slides, so now I have to edit them down into a document again. Oh geez, I just realised that I missed a really crucial bit of information. It must have been on one of those pages that was a full page and I've looked at the top and not at the bottom. So I'm not finished yet. Hold that thought. This has got to be the biggest bit of information we've been given from these newly unredacted documents. And I clearly missed that part of the page. Like I said, if it's a long page, I will zoom in and then scroll up, and I clearly forgot. But to me, this is huge. As for the police investigation, Martell said he recently signed a consent form and submitted a blood sample to the RCMP for genetic analysis. I watched investigators check the box for myself, indicating no criminal involvement, he said, so I have no criminal involvement, and that was my very first time seeing that in writing. He really is a twit, isn't he? I've just explained all that. They're going to tick no criminal involvement because as yet they've not named him as a suspect. Now, are you ready for the mic drop moment? And here it is. During the interview Thursday, Martell said the blood sample he submitted would be used to test something on a blanket, but he did not provide details. Would that be the piece of blanket that was found in a tree that Daniel has spent the last 8 months trying to convince everyone was clearly planted by someone in Malaya's family? Or the larger piece of blanket? But we know from one of the articles in, I think it was October, that they got the forensic results back for those pieces of blanket roughly in October. And now they're doing blood tests for genetic analysis. I should have actually messaged Belinda and asked her if they had requested Cody do a blood test for forensic analysis also, because that right there, that tells us there is forensic evidence on one of those pieces of blanket. That forensic evidence is blood. I'm not sure why they're not simply extracting DNA from the blood sample on the blanket, other than perhaps the sample is too small for them to extract DNA. But I'd be willing to take a guess that Malaya's probably also been asked to do the same. And if they are trying to rule out Lily and Jack's blood, then they may have made a similar request of Cody. Watch this space, folks, because I think one of those pieces of blanket could well end up being a crucial piece of evidence when this does finally go to trial. So now that brings us to the end. I can't believe I nearly missed that bit out. Like I said, it must have been on the bottom of one of those pages and I didn't scroll up. But I assure you, I haven't missed anything else out. I've read through these documents. You probably guessed by now I have a memory that's like a trap. I don't forget things. So I knew that I hadn't covered it. I know there's nothing else that I haven't discussed. So on that note, thanks for listening. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit that like button. And please leave a comment below. I'm sure you've got many, many thoughts to share after going through all this information. So on that note, thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.